to Startup Kitchen Talk, where we discuss startup apprentices becoming master chefs. Usually the startup master chefing takes years, maybe decades, but sometimes a baby is born with a keyboard and baby brain already downloaded Slack. And that being said, please welcome our today's guest, a Chief Product and Technology Officer at MEWS, Josef Starychfojtu, aka Peppa the Whiz. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Hi.
What will we do when you're 60?
What will I do when I'm 60?
Yes.
I'll have a restaurant and I'll be a teacher on some school, hopefully.
That is very nice and very unexpected. So you make the career and the money and everything you make in your 20s and 30s, and then you become a teacher.
Maybe that's one option, but I love food. I'm a huge foodie, and so I would love to have like a restaurant where you kind of go on the weekends to just greet the guests and enjoy some food, and have a business where I always say that in management or in business, etc., it's very hard to please people. Usually, like, you upset more people than you please, and therefore, like, later in life, I would love to have like just simply pleasing business. Like, everyone loves restaurants and food, etc. So you only please people, basically.
And tell me, did you good place that you're in Startup Kitchen though, but have you ever worked in a restaurant? Have you worked in a kitchen? Because I did. I'm not sure that it is such a nice people-pleasing venue and business as you would imagine.
It's a very hard business. I did work in KFC when I was 14 or 15. But obviously that's not the restaurant I would love to have. It's a very hard business, so my sort of precondition is that it doesn't need to be profitable. So I don't hope to have a profitable restaurant. I hope to have a restaurant.
A nice restaurant.
A nice restaurant, yeah.
Oh, well, maybe that one will not be ruled like a pirate ship, which was essentially where I was working. So before you started your career at KFC, you already had your first software gig, right? Because I think that you read your first book about software when you were 12, and your first gig was when you were 13.
Yeah. When I was 4, I started playing chess.
Of course.
And chess was...
As any 4-year-old.
As any 4. And chess was a huge part of my, growing up, and I played competitively, etc. And my chess teacher...
In 5 or?
No, like later on a little bit. But yeah, most competitions are usually around, age 6, 7, 8 are the kind of first categories. But my chess teacher, he was a programmer, and it sort of inspired me. It was like interesting. And when I was 12, I got a book about programming, or I wished for a book, and I got it for my 12th birthday, and I basically read it.
Instead of Harry Potter.
Now I read Harry Potter to catch up.
Well, maybe when you were 40, you will get to Peppa the Pig or something.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But how did you understand the code, the ones and zeros? How did you understand as a kid? Was that like a building structure, like, I don't know, Minecraft or of some sort? Or what was it for you?
Like, I think any 12-year-old is capable of writing code. There is tons of 12-year-olds writing code. But it was an introductory book that helped you understand C#. It was meant for like schools, I think, the book that I read. It was basically like a textbook. Yeah. And you program some funny things, some games, some like useful apps. And I got hooked very, very quickly. I wanted to do more and more, and then when I was 13, I found out about like a one-time gig where I programmed.
What was that?
I think it was an app for some like event. It was like this kind of like when you run an event, sometimes you have like a accompanying app for the event, and it was something like James Bond wise. I don't really remember what it was.
And was that, by the way, illegal? And now I'm not sure what the law says, but 13?
I don't know. Probably not. But there was I think there is some way you can earn money before you're 15 if it's up,
Yeah.
capped with an amount, and it was definitely way lower than that
And children
threshold.
actors, right?
Yeah.
You once told me in our previous interview, you told me that finding your passion is bullshit. Is that what you say to your almost 500 of employees?
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, I tell this to everyone. I don't believe passion is something you find. I think that's a trait. I think you are either passionate or you're not. And every single thing I've ever done, I was like super passionate about. When I worked in KFC, I was super passionate about upselling strategies, and I read books and studied how do you make the best upsell, basically, to a customer. When I, whatever I did, basically, I always kind of educated myself and tried to be the best at it, and was passionate about whatever it was. So the main thing I'm personally passionate about is kind of like continuous progress, learning, things like that, and that you can usually find in a lot of jobs or hobbies. And Therefore, I don't think you need to, like, there is like, the same as like there is not a single partner waiting for you in the world. Like, you can have a great marriage with a lot of people. That's not very romantic, but it's true.
Are you married?
I am married, yeah.
Good luck.
But the same way, like, you don't have to be married to a single job, right? Like, there is a lot of things probably that you will find interesting, and you can sort of try out and see. I don't think there is like a one single passion you have to find and do. I think you have to be passionate about.
But when
the
you're
journey.
passionate about everything, or when you get passionate easily about stuff, isn't that way more difficult than to stuck with that one thing? We're not talking about partners, we're talking about jobs now.
No, I don't see how that we like. You get, at least I get bored more easily. Because I get more passionate easily. I also get bored more easily. So
it's a two-way street, yeah.
It's a two-way street. So sometimes I do sort of like, change, especially hobbies. I love to change them basically very regularly. But even like, that's what I love about startups and scale ups, etc. It's like, essentially the company is a different company every week, or if not a week.
So you never get bored in work?
You can't get bored working in a startup or scale up. If you obviously, like, if the startup and scale up is actually scaling, it is becoming different.
It's actually startup.
If it's not like just a lean, small, profitable business, but if it's an actual ambitious business, then you can't get bored. There is so much to do, and it's so different all the time, and
and what would you recommend to somebody who starts feeling bored or burned out, struggles to find the passion? Is there something you would tell them?
That's a very generic question. That's very hard because I've never. But I can tell you basically what I do when I feel, a little down. For me, like, journaling is a really good, like, point of self-reflection. Like, whenever I feel down or that things are not working or something is off, I usually sit down with my notebook and sort of like just start writing my thoughts. And I had a lot of coaches on the way that helped me go through a lot of things, and I think they helped me to sort of coach myself through this journaling. And usually after that session, I come out like energized and full of energy, to like knowing basically what was wrong and what can I do to fix that. But everyone is different, and it's hard to come up with like generic advice on how to prevent.
Sure, but like coaching and changing hobbies, I think that's a good approach. You start coding at 12, and now you lead hundreds of people. So what is easier, code or people?
Code is definitely easier, because if you commit code and then you want to change it, it's very easy to revert a code. So a mistake, it can only be a mistake for a few seconds or minutes, and you can easily revert a mistake and learn from it. One of the hardest things about leading hundreds of people is that it's a very slow moving ship. And therefore, if you want to change something, it takes months, sometimes even years. to fully change, and therefore the feedback loop is very, very slow. So if you make a mistake, it's a very costly mistake because you'll spend, not a few minutes writing it, but you'll spend months writing it metaphorically, and
you can't go Command Z.
and then you can't undo it basically because for some reason, like that reason is obvious, but if you everyone sort of encourages like agile and like experiment, try different things, but if you do that as a leader, people will hate you.
Really?
No one likes changing direction every month, right? Like everyone likes sort of stability, consistency. Like tell me what, everyone wants to be told what the direction is, and that direction to be kept for like a reasonable amount of time, and that reasonable amount of time is usually at least a year. So if you set the wrong direction, you can change it. Sometimes you need to change it, but no one likes it, even though it's like what they all do basically within their own teams. But because the sort of alignment of organization is such an expensive exercise, you can't afford to do it very often.
Talk about me, because before you studied engineering, and then when you become a manager, you told me that you bought a lot of books and study a lot of styles. What do you think about those rules? Like you mentioned agile or the brutal honesty. What do you think about that?
You mean all the self-help books and like the
Well,
frameworks
now
for
I meant more like management style.
books about management?
No, your approach. What do you think about
Oh.
those? Because then there's always like a hype around, you mentioned agile, the structure and the style. And then there was a wave of the brutal honesty. So where do you stand there? What do you think?
I think the way to approach it is like you can't have one style, you can't do just one thing. A lot of times these frameworks are a good default, like if you're new to something, like so if you have, for example, a junior team or like a new team, it's a good idea to follow a certain methodology, and it's a good default, but it wouldn't be okay if you stick with that methodology for a long period of time. Like you should evolve and ultimately find your own methodology. And I think the same applies to management. Like you can't be like I'm a servant leader or I'm a dictator or whatever. Like every situation, every person, every team, every project requires a completely different approach, and sometimes you need to be a little bit more hands-on and directive. Sometimes you need to be a little bit hands-off and just asking the right questions, and sometimes you need to be more visionary, sometimes you need to be more tactical, and that just depends. And you need to be like T-shaped very well. You need to know when to go in depth, when not to go, when to go in breadth, and that ultimately like you have limited capacity in your day, and choosing where you go in depth, where you go in breadth is basically an essential element of management and leadership. And I don't think there is a single way to do it. Everyone has their own way, and it works for a certain. And also, every business is incentivized differently. Something that works in a big profitable corporate will not work.
Yeah, sure.
And we see that very often. There is a saying that ultimately every 2 years in a scale up you need to change, like a lot of people, because what worked in the previous stage will not work in the next stage of the company, and people don't grow as quickly as companies do. I don't believe that's
But you're
true.
there for 7 years, right?
Yeah, and I don't believe that's true, because like if you look at most founders, they are there from like day one to so I think from my experience it's rather that people choose not to, like they don't want to invest that amount of time and energy into scaling with the organization, or they don't prefer it. But I don't think it's like a case of they can't. Like I think everyone can, or most can. It's just that more people don't want to, and they like a certain stage of a company. They like a certain environment, and they don't want for that environment to change.
That is true about like majority, maybe not majority, but of many founders that are at later stage, they are gonna be replaced. Do you see you being replaced anytime soon? Like that you would go back to really, because you're a scale up now, a unicorn status, would you go back to those early stages, or are you comfortable where you are?
I'm very comfortable where I am. I don't.
Unexpected answer.
Like, in the same way I'm passionate about everything, I'm passionate about every stage of the company. So I don't
Yeah.
miss,
The wild
earlier
days.
stages. I don't miss anything about it. It was great. But now it's great as well from like different perspective, and I love that it's different. And so therefore like that kind of really keeps me on my toes, and that's what I enjoy a lot. But obviously, the company will probably continue to scale, and there might be a point in time in future where it's no longer a place that I enjoy for a lot of reasons. But I don't.
And then you have a restaurant later.
And then I
in
have a
your-
restaurant, but I don't foresee that becoming true anytime soon.
Yeah. You are CPTO. That means that you lead R&D, design, engineering, cybersecurity, basically like everything that it's not business or fundraising goes up to you. How much then of a goldfish are you? How much is like 5 minutes this? Or is it like one day this, second day this?
The hardest thing we have found and learned is not functions. Like it's not hard to lead engineering, product design, data science, security, like all of that. You can hire great functional leaders and they will run the functions for you. I think that's fairly easy. The harder thing is the actual business and what you actually work on, like what those functions actually achieve. Our business is very fragmented. So we are in 7,000 hotels today with our core solution, and over 13,000 hotels in all of our sort of solutions combined. And it's in around 85 countries. Today, we have hotels that have 20 rooms, and we have hotels that have 800 rooms. We have, independent small boutiques, and we have global chains. And we have around 10 SaaS products, some fintech products, payments. And if you combine like all these countries, all these segments, like all these product lines together, that's the hardest part. I always envy when I talk to companies that have like one single product. Like in a way, like if you, for example, look at Netflix, like it's a very simple product to understand. Like you go
a lot
there.
of people there do though.
there is a lot of like in its current format. Like there is obviously a lot to it, and the complexity is huge behind the scenes. But at the front line, like it's an easy product to understand. Like everyone understands basically. It has two screens: one where you try to find a show or you get a show recommended,
Yet
and the one
some
that
business
you play.
as Netflix is very profitable and very successful, and then there's maybe I can say all the others, Disney, Prime, HBO Max, or whatever the name is right now, which are struggling to follow. So you see, you've got one product, different execution.
Different execution, but what's really like good about this category, for example, of products, it is like simple to grasp, and you can focus a lot on like how can I become the best at this, for example. Whereas if you have a B2B, B2B2C, fintech, SaaS in 85 countries across all segments, basically in a very fragmented industry, like that's very hard to sort of cope with and sort of know like what's the most important thing basically in the next quarter. Like that's much harder to sort of dissect that down.
But it's still good for the goldfish brain, which is passionate about stuff, right?
That's what you need to sort of like train yourself onto, is that you're able to switch context completely. Like it doesn't feel like running a business, it does feel like running 10 businesses basically. And within each business it's quite clear like what needs to get done, but if you sit on top of these businesses basically knowing like which business is doing well, which not, and what needs to change in a certain business, and it's critical to have kind of cross-functional leaders who are responsible for that part of the business, so that like you can be very clear with them like what needs to get done, what are the priorities for your business. There is like a lot of people say that like focus is like absolutely critical, you need to have focus as an organization, etc. I don't agree with that, because I think every person needs to have a focus, and every team needs to have a focus, and every team that they need for that focus needs to have the same focus. But it doesn't mean that the whole organization needs to focus on one thing, right? Like if you think like Microsoft probably doesn't have like one thing they focus on, right? Like every business line sort of focuses on something different. And And I think we are a business that's like fairly small compared to the size, kind of compared to the number of relative business units we have in the business. We run it as one business. We have one P&L, one customer, and everything. But the complexity looks like basically like it's 10 businesses basically in one.
10 businesses, that means that you surround yourself more with people like yourself, that they are passionate about everything. They can think 5 minutes about one thing, 5 minutes about completely another thing, completely business. Is those other goldfish, yes? Or do you then surround yourself in your close team by people who are expert on certain domains?
What I believe a lot in is that like the closer you are kind of to the ground, the more you need expertise in a certain thing, right? Like an extreme version of an expert is like a database administrator, you know, like you can't be a generalized database administrator. Like you have to know the database in real depth to solve the hardest issues there are. But the harder you are in the organization, the more sort of cross-functional generalist you need to be, because that's where like alignment, speed of decision makings, and things like that basically come into play. And that's why our organizational structure is very cross-functional. So you can imagine it as like I don't have a VP of design, VP of engineering, VP of product reporting to me. I have kind of many CPTOs basically reporting to me for their own area. And even basically as you go down, you get kind of more specialized and specialized roles. So it looks like a pyramid basically.
A different kind.
A different kind. Where basically like you have the VP of product engineering, you know, for a certain division, and they end-to-end over everything in their division. So it's like a mini CPTO. Then they have for every single tribe, they have a director of engineering, director of product. So it kind of like branches out into two. And then it branches out further. So in product, you have design, product management, UX,
and there you
etc.
have the experts.
And then you have the experts, and in engineering, you obviously have like engineering managers, and then you have like SREs and SDETs and front end, back end, full stack, and mobile, and it gets kind of more specialized as you go down.
So that means that when you have your restaurants, or restaurant A or plural, well, that means that you will train how to, cook as well. Because that's not a very high pyramid, is it? It's more like you and few people.
Restaurant is a small tight business, so it doesn't apply, I guess, very much. And you need to have a bunch of experts, basically, mostly, because everyone in the restaurant is kind of close to the ground. Like, only people, like, let's say you would have a chain of restaurants, then obviously the people beyond a single location could be more generalist, but
still looking forward. You joined MEWS in 2018 as a software engineer, then 6 months later tech lead, then director, senior director, VP, then CTO, now CPTO. This all happened above 5-6 years in total. How did your colleagues take it? Like, how did your peers take it?
I think at the beginning, like I had some like weird situations at very early beginnings when I was like, a first line manager, let's say. There it was a little
such as,
like, for example, you are managing someone who is like way older than you, and they didn't kind of respect that reality and etc. So there's definitely a little bit of that.
But did you take that personally, or were you like, me? Happens.
No, I don't like you can't take things personally. There was a good advice from Ben Horowitz in one of his books, is that basically like he talked about CEOs, but ultimately it applies to every manager or leader. It's like leaders make two mistakes. One is they take things too personally, and one thing is they don't take things personally enough. So it's like, you have to balance, like, you have to obviously respond to things that are problematic within the culture of your team, but you also can't basically treat them as kind of your mistakes or your problems, because then you couldn't sleep, then you like just wouldn't be able to deal with that at all. But on the other hand, I think I had the technical respect, from the team, and like they kind of knew basically I was okay at programming and kind of software architecture, and the job was still fairly technical even as a first line manager basically back then. But going up, I think it was mostly received well, that it shows that the organization kind of values merit, and it doesn't kind of look at where do you come from, who you are, etc. And rewards sort of like pure merit and what you can achieve. And I think I was able to
So later on, it completely disappeared.
Yeah, it completely disappeared, and I think it turned into like actually quite a nice thing. But obviously, like now I feel more detached from everyone I used to work with in the early days. Like, yeah, obviously, like we talk about like where did you go on a holiday, but I can't go to like a pub with them because that's where most people would just complain. Like people love to complain about things, right?
You don't think that as a manager you can go to pub with your employees?
I don't. I think you can. I don't think it's good for you to go there necessarily. Maybe sometimes, but like I think it's much better if they have the space to sort of like vent fully and talk about issues openly, because like
you mean to talk about shit about you?
Yeah, exactly. They need to trash talk me basically, etc. And just the idea that you might say something that will then have a business implication is not a safe environment basically. And even if you have the kind of like psychologically safe culture and all of that, basically, like still like it's very human basically to think that like, oh yeah, like the boss is here basically.
But that kind of feels like a lonely road, to be honest. Like
it's very lonely. It's lonely at the top, as they say. It's very lonely. One thing, like a lot of times, businesses, like there is one sort of saying that the business should be kind of led by just one person because it's more effective, the decisions are clear, the direction is clear, etc. But actually, a lot of great businesses were founded by two people, and like you always had like Steve Wozniak and then you had
good and bad
Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, even though they obviously didn't start together. And so there is a lot of these kind of couples, and our company also has Richard and Matt, who are Matt is the CEO, Richard is the founder, and I just love the dynamic. I actually like it. It sometimes
is that like a dynamic of Steve and Woz?
I wasn't there, building Apple, so hard to say.
But you've seen the movies, read the book.
But I would say like what does resonate is like Richard is kind of the more sort of visionary, whereas Matt is much more focused on like execution and it's much more practical. Like Richard only talks about things that will be 10 years in the future, whereas like Matt can go down and really actually break it down, like what will happen next year, and they really well complement each other. So I actually think that like it's also great for them psychologically that Matt has always someone to go to, Richard has always someone to go to, and they complement each other very, very well. And I think that's a huge benefit
and who are
of our
you
business. But I don't have someone like that basically, so it is indeed very lonely. That's why people love to kind of find communities and have like groups of CTOs meeting and mentors who just kind of like share the pain. But
a lot of hobbies.
Yeah, a lot of hobbies, but I haven't found an effective one, because even if you do find like a fellow CPTO, CTO, your business is so different. The scale of the business is so different that most things actually don't apply, and it's very hard to kind of share the pain. So it's a very lonely job, and I think my wife then gets most of the troubles.
She's the boss to your jobs.
Exactly. They say there is always behind every successful man there is even a more successful woman.
Sometimes the position can shift and change as well. Did you ever mind being lonely on the road?
I didn't always love it. Yeah, it felt a bit weird. Like you don't feel alone. Like you have a team and you go to offsites together and like you create stuff together, and that I get a lot of energy from. But it's when you have problems, basically, like they can't help you with those problems. And but I think Matt and Richard are really good at I don't feel necessarily like they're just like my bosses. I do actually find that the relationship is kind of peer wise a lot of times, and therefore sometimes I'll call Richard, sometimes I'll call Matt about things, and they that kind of helps out. Or that's where the coaches helped me a lot. Like the coach felt like my only buddy basically in the system.
you mentioned the problems. Is problem solving, to put out the fires that are burning, is that 50% or less of your day-to-day work?
Depends on the week. There are weeks when it's 0%. There are weeks when it's 100%.
Average?
I would say average 30%. It's not
30%.
actually a huge. I wouldn't say I need to
Sounds
put on
doable.
fires. That sounds doable. And even if you do, like every time you need to put out a fire, like one thing is to put down the fire, but then obviously the more important part of your job is how do you ensure that that fire doesn't ever get sort of to that extent again, like, and then you sort of think about, how do I need to change systems, organization, culture, processes, tools, whatever, so that the organization is capable of solving that problem on its own. So it doesn't need me. And you basically, the way you think about your job is like, how can you eliminate yourself continuously?
Yeah.
Everything I did yesterday, how can I never do it? Never do it again, basically. So that you can actually take on the new challenges when the company scales, because as you scale, you need to actually change what you do significantly, and therefore you're structurally obliged to actually get rid of your job every year so that you can take the new job basically is waiting for you next year.
MEWS weren't the first with the PMS idea, but as you said correctly in one of your interviews, rarely the companies that come with the idea first are the one that we know and that are successful now. Yeah. So what is the unicorn recipe for this, rare mythological horse?
So first of all, the category that we started out in is called property management systems, and it's nothing new. Like, they are here since 70s, like a long time, basically. Like it's a thing that was always. It's not a new category. What is new is, and probably the biggest sort of technological wave is going to cloud. Hotels are actually quite behind in technology. They're not very technology savvy, and therefore the transition to cloud only happens now in hospitality. And it's been, I think it still is true that most hotels in the world run on premise and they don't actually run in cloud. So the huge sort of like tailwind that we are riding on, and every big company basically rides on some tailwind, is the sort of transition to cloud in hospitality. And the barrier to entry to such business is super high. So building a property management system and the associated businesses with it is extremely difficult. And therefore you don't have as many players basically as in, even though there is actually thousands of property management systems, but because the industry is so fragmented, they usually serve a very small portion of hotels. So MEWS is one of the very few systems that can actually handle diverse segments and regions, etc. What sort of fueled the engine a lot is the fact that we were able to add payments very early, and so we were better at monetizing the customer. I think we were like the first on the market to actually have a integrated or embedded payment solution as part of it, and therefore, like, the average revenue per user obviously goes high. That means you can invest more into your R&D. That means you can build better product, etc. And it sort of piles on. I think we also had and still have a really good inorganic growth strategy. So we acquire a lot of businesses, and because we are better at monetizing a single customer, that inorganic machine is very profitable venture. So I think that was also a huge part of our success, and obviously some of the key differentiators in how we think about the platform. And one of the biggest things was definitely, which was kind of the driver for why the company was founded, is the open API and the flexibility on top of the platform. The way we sort of said, like, everyone can build on top of us, and we have the biggest marketplace in the industry, and everyone can sort of integrate towards us, and therefore a hotel is never limited to sort of like extend their stack. And there was a huge driver, obviously, of like this kind of whole partner ecosystem that kind of grew with us. Also, the way how we actually think about the guest, so that like every every property management system is focused on the reservation and the room. And the previous CTO, I remember, said to Matt, like, yeah, but the room will not pay for the reservation. It will be the guest, right? So what about we like make the guest the kind of central entity in the architecture, and that turned out to be this kind of like CRM first kind of mindset to it, and so much more. But these are just some of the few things that kind of, you know, make us
The
stand
execution.
apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We already touched the issue of, the cost of problems, the cost of mistakes. If engineering messes up, the worst case, you are maybe a month late. If design messes up, you rewrite the code and maybe 1 month or 2 months. But if the product gets it wrong, you burn millions of euros. You also mentioned the diversity of your customers, from small bed and breakfasts to very large hotel chains. So how do you get the product right so you don't lose those millions of dollars, euros, never mind.
Good question. Just to basically like, in a B2B business, I don't think you have the luxury again of, we can A/B test something.
Yes.
In 5 minutes we'll know like if people are clicking on it or not, because that's not how the monetization, like you need to know basically like, will people buy this? And that is a very complex thing to do in B2B. And therefore every single thing you do like requires some investment, and that investment is sizable. So there's very few things you can do like in a week and try it out. There's some things you can do, and obviously we have payments and other things which are more usage based, so you can, those kind of usage based things you can tune a little bit. But mostly basically you need to, like, the feedback loop is let's say a quarter. Like if you do it very well, like your feedback loop is a quarter, and therefore choosing the right thing to invest into is absolutely critical.
So how much of it is asking the questions?
And what I like prefer, and I found like the kind of best way to make sure that you don't build stuff that like no one wants, or that like doesn't have the value that you associate with it, is this kind of idea of like sell before you build. And thinking basically about yourself, about it, like not like I have this vision and I will build this product and this will be the best thing basically in the world and then I will go and sell it, but thinking more through the lens of, well, let's speak to 5 customers from a segment that we like to solve for, that we now want to solve for, or a country that we now want to kind of focus on, and let's see what problems basically do they have in this domain that we kind of want to focus on, and let's solve the problem for them first. Like, let's first try and get it right with these kind of 5 kind of like alpha customers, and then only then basically let's try to sort of think about, okay, how can we generalize this to a product that then can scale. But basically, like, then when you are scaling, you already have a set of referenceable customers that are already paying for a version of that product basically, and you know basically that there is market demand before you actually scale the product. So we always insist that every single major thing we do is built with customers, for customers. But basically, like, we even had a hackathon where we sent a team to a hotel and they basically like built with the hotel there. So being as close to the customer as you can, making sure that you validate willingness to pay, their usage very closely. Have a product, for example, that's in kind of beta with 30 customers, for example, for several months, and we don't even know like when we will go to general availability with that product, because we will only know, like, we'll basically work with the customers, and the moment they tell us that basically like, and we can see on our data as well that they actually use it the way they, because sometimes what people say is not what they actually do. But if the data of usage and willingness to pay basically is there, that's a strong signal that, like, okay, like, we can actually throw more money into this and we can we can scale it out and launch this as a product in general availability.
And how much culture differences is there? You said that you need to, try it with the local clients. So how much is, because I always remember the Duolingo CEO thinking, oh, there were so many, I know it's different business, but he said, oh, there's going to be so many culture differences. And he said, oh, there weren't any. So what is your experience with that?
There's plenty of culture differences, and it's not just because people behave differently, and they do, but it's also regulatory differences across countries, and it's a lot of small things, like in Germany, if you want to expense your invoice as a business traveler, you need to have an address of the company basically on the invoice and some other details, right? And suddenly, like, you need to build a feature that enables guests to put that on that invoice, but they only want it in Germany, and sometimes, yes, this makes sense potentially for everyone, but it doesn't mean you would build it for everyone. Just making sense for everyone doesn't mean like that's not good enough to pass. Like, just the fact that you can use it doesn't mean that's the best thing you would want to use. And then obviously, like, fiscalization and taxes are extremely difficult, especially in Europe, where
that's more on the regulation side.
It's more on the
Yeah,
regulation.
we're gonna touch that subject in a while. I meant more on the culture side, like that.
That
big
is
chain
also...
hotels want this, but some travelers there want completely different experience.
That is also like extremely different. So you have obviously differences in segments of hotels: a motel, a hostel, a luxury resort, and a big corporate hotel. They want something completely different than a
And where
service.
do you stay? What's your most favorite kind of accommodation?
It depends where I go, basically what purpose of the stay it is. But I obviously love to go on a... Like, I when we go on holidays, I like hiking. So I usually stay in like campsites. But a hotel that we really like is when we go skiing to Austria. So every year, there is this hotel that's kind of next to the slope, and they have a nice wellness and a good...
And it's close by, so you
good...
don't have to carry the skis uphill.
exactly.
That helps.
So that's obviously really good. But even the regional differences are extreme in just like the software. Even just the labor cost, for example, is different in every country, and therefore
but then it's more on the production side than on the execution. By the way, has anyone ever laughed at you because you said that you worked in PMS?
No.
No, never. It was the first thing that I listened to your interview, and I was like, hey, PMS.
I think only one female friend sort of laughed about it, but it doesn't come up very quickly.
Now you've got two.
Now we've got two, indeed.
When we compare the global markets, because you're big in Europe, you're not as big in the United States, but you are entering American market as well. And I know that European market is way more fragmented, way more regulated. What is the biggest BS you have to dealt with in Europe?
By the way, when I said labor cost, I meant even for the hotels, right? So, like,
of course,
the ROI of the software is different. Like, so for example, that's why the software is more popular in Western countries, because if you can automate stuff, that has higher value than it has basically in sort of more kind of Eastern countries. But there's a lot of things, but one of the worst basically things we had to overcome was this fiscalization in France, where it's we sort
favorite destination
favorite destination, and we had this thing in Czechia called EET, and we complained about it so much, and basically, like, it took a week of one developer to implement EET, and it was up and running, and it was fine, and it was actually super developer friendly. It was great. The same equivalent basically in France took a year for 10 people, and we had to promise like crazy stuff, like we would put a code on like a CD ROM, and then you can't change the code and things like that. It's like
The
basically
ET
like
code needs to be
yeah,
burned out
yeah,
on
basically,
CD.
yeah,
Did
exactly.
you have computers that can burn down a CD?
I think
Because I don't know
I
how to do
think we
that.
basically like exported it on a CD on someone's PC, but basically like the cost of development for that was enormous, and
Yeah.
it's not just the development but the maintenance. Like we have to go through an annual audit with them basically up to this date, where every year basically they certify that our product is able to handle that. Now, for example, we were trying to go to Portugal with our POS solution, and we quickly find out basically that like the Portuguese governance basically only like heavily incentivizes only Portuguese POSs. So getting in basically from outside is very, very hard, and they basically won't certify you unless you do something ridiculous. So we basically said we don't want to go into that market. So we didn't enter Portugal just because, you know, of this kind of obscure task of going through certification, and this happened on so many levels in so many countries basically in Europe. And
So we just jumped over them. It's not worthy, as in Portugal.
no, it's not worth it basically.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and even like you could debate like for a smaller player, the French endeavor wouldn't be profitable as well. Like it is for us because we are sort of big enough in France, but for any smaller company or startup, like that's millions, you know, sunk costs into what is essentially a tax on the business, basically like a tariff upfront.
You still got Paris and the Alps and Osegor, so at least something. But United States, you said to me that it is way tougher to enter and to be successful on the market. Is it because the large hotel chain, or because there's too much competition on the market already? How do you perceive it?
There's a lot of things we're seeing. Is definitely like it's a huge market that's homogeneous. So you know, the fact that it's basically like, you know, that you have the same sort of fiscalization and tax environment. Like you do have different taxes, but the tax structure is the same, and so the barrier to entry is actually lower than in, for example, France. And it's also super huge, and it's a market that overall is, you know, technologically and business wise kind of more advanced. And people do, you know, understand that building a business is a exciting way to get rich, essentially, and therefore so there is more competition on the market because there is so much more people, because the market is bigger. The culture is much more sort of business savvy than it is, for example, here in Czechia. So you have more people trying to build businesses, and the total addressable market of just that market is super huge. If you build a company in Czechia and you will serve the whole Czech market, it's a very tiny company.
It's tiny.
But if you build a company in US and it's a US company only, it's a massive company that can go public, right? So the motivation, the opportunity, the culture basically is there, and therefore the competition definitely is tougher. People, it's also like a huge service culture. Like if you go to US, it's normally to tip like 20% basically on a build. And you know, a huge percentage of their wage is that
it really
tip.
depends on the country. Sometimes they make, you know, minimal wage, like Alaska, and sometimes they get like $3 per hour, and 90% of their income is tips.
Yeah, exactly. And so therefore the service levels are so much higher. That means that because guests demand more from the staff then demands more from your software as well. So it's sort of like cascades, this
Chain
sort of like
demand,
capitalistic nature basically of US, like cascades to everything, and therefore it is overall from that perspective more competitive and tougher.
And how do they perceive you, the American market? You said how protective the Portuguese market is. How protective of itself is the American market? Do they Like, are they welcoming European solutions, or are they thinking, oh, Eastern Europe, oh, we can build it better in the USA?
I think that really turned around when we actually started investing in US, and now we have around 150 or even more, maybe 200 now employees in US. We have key leadership in US. So our founder Richard, he lives in New York, right? And Mike, our president, also lives in US, and we have a very senior leadership team in US as well. We have a lot of support and customer success people in US and sales people in US, and suddenly, you know, the company doesn't need to be an American company, but it needs to feel like an American company. The same way, actually, any Czech person wants any company they work with to feel like a Czech company, and every German customer wants to work at a company that feels like. You need to feel local. You don't need to be local, but you need to feel local. That means you need to have people on the ground. You need to have people who understand the market. You need to invest into things like, localization, translation, understanding trends. It was even stupid things like the fact that we didn't accept dollars at the beginning as a way to build, like, these small things. Basically, they show up. Local integrations and brand presence, but we invested a lot into it, and right now we are finding tremendous success. Actually, it's our fastest growing region by quite a bit.
Feel local. You felt local both in New York and in Prague. Can we play a quick fire round, New York or Prague?
Sure.
So which is more modern, New York or Prague?
Prague.
Where is better business mindset?
New York.
Who has better and stronger tech culture?
That depends on what a tech culture means, but from a business perspective, definitely New York. From like a hardcore, sort of
12-year-old reading software engineering books.
That I would say, like, that's hard to compare, but my guess would be that it's probably equal.
That's equal. Better tech talent?
Again, depends. Like, tech. Like, we have to mind that New York is
cost-wise.
Cost-wise is definitely Prague. But we have to bear in mind that, like, technical, like, if you need, like, New York is a much bigger city than Prague, right? So
of course.
So the probability, basically, like, even
playing a game,
even being like on an equal level is a tremendous, basically, success for. But I think how I always describe it is that, like, the technical knowledge is definitely here in, like, Central Europe, like, very well sort of propagated. We have great schools. When I was studying MATFIS, we had people coming from US studying MATFIS and be like we read on Reddit that this is like an amazing school, like an MIT level, basically, for free almost. So why not come and study? So from that perspective, I think we have a really good technological layer. We have super smart people, huge talent, but we are not good like monetizing the talent, and that's what.
That was the previous question, the business mindset.
Yeah, the tech person basically in New York or in US is not only able to write the software, but also to sell the software, understand the customer pains, know what to build, design it. Like, they're much more kind of cross-functional in that way.
Yeah, fragmented. Happier people.
Yes. They definitely seem much more happy in New York. If you go to a restaurant in New York, people actually smile at you. That's not a thing here in Czechia. So
that's politeness.
So the politeness, basically, or like it feels happier. Like, if you take a cab, for example, like the cab driver will talk to you like you're their friend. That will never happen in Prague. Like, in Prague, it's almost weird. And so, like, it feels cozier, but and I haven't lived in Europe for an extended period of time, but obviously, like, happiness levels, I'm definitely much happier in Prague.
Less bureaucracy and regulations.
Definitely New York.
Better food.
I think I actually prefer the Prague food scene. to New York. I think the best food scene is in London,
Mhm.
but I actually like New York has tremendous food, but the cost is crazy. Like it's 10x basically.
And you wait in line for a long time.
Yeah, it is really good, but if you put a price in equation, I definitely prefer Prague.
And where would you rather live?
Prague.
Prague. Do you think that you can have it's always trade-off, or can you have it all at one place? That's what I meant with all those questions, like that you really want to live there because it's, safe, easy. Sometimes people are nice or happy, the school systems, but it also has like the really capitalistic business mindset that you say, and a lot of founders and startups say that, and investors, that we lack here. Do you think that it needs to be a trade-off?
I think so. Yeah, like depends on. It doesn't need to be trade-off in this particular thing, but every place will be different. Basically, like the same way. Like if you have kids, you probably want to live in a different place
Yeah,
than if
for
you
sure.
don't have kids, etc. So, every place will have its trade-off. But I think we could debate basically like why is that here?
Like, do you think that we can have it all? Like in any country, to have the capitalistic and business mindset and the hustle, but also safe, nice place and happy people and nice education for the family. Is there a place, do you think? I know it's a difficult question, but do you think that there is a place, or there could be a place to have it all?
I don't think you could have it all. I think you could have a lot. Like it's a matter of like what do you kind of invest in,
Yes.
and what do you want to have. You can't have everything, but you can have things that are important. The other thing is like whether that's something that you would want to do, because if you optimize for something, you then attract a certain type of people
Yeah.
that will have implications or on the other areas. So I think it's actually quite fair that like every single place is kind of optimized for something else and you can move freely
And you can move freely.
across
Thank
those
God.
places. Yeah.
And what is the ideal configuration? Like to have the MEWS structure, so you have R&D here and business there. What is the best configuration?
We still have R&D in US as well,
Mhm.
and across the globe. Though obviously the biggest portion would probably be Czechia, though countries like Spain and UK like are almost at levels of Czechia or like very high. Um, my dream team, basically, of like what's the best composition of a team is, three very, very senior Czech engineers, one mid-level junior Czech engineer, and then two kind of US engineers to, like have the diversity basically of like the sort of like, you want like a seniority across the technology stack, like you want that sort of technical acumen. On top of that, you want some of that like product customer centric infiltration into the team. Um, and then you also want like diversity of seniority in the team, and then you also want a reasonable cost structure of the team as well.
And that's the Czechia. News is completely changing how people travel tech-wise. Is there something non-tech-wise that you would like to change about travel, how people travel? Speak more local, eat more local food, or is there anything that you would like to have changed?
Changed in how we traveled. Um, you said like there's a lot of things Muse wants to influence and change in how we travel, and we do that through technology, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like technology is the thing. The way we think about technology is the technology is like in the background. Like, if you kind of looked how a check-in at hotel looked like 200 years ago, like you probably came into a hotel and they greeted you and show you the room. Today it's like, oh, give me your password, and like, I will stare in the computer for 5 minutes before I look at you. So we actually like, as a result of having technology,
we downgraded.
We sort of downgraded the experience. Obviously, like thanks to technology, more people can travel, and it's easier to find a place to sleep. So technology boosted a lot of the velocity of travel, but the actual experience we feel like can be actually worse. And that's that's one of the kind of core components of what we are trying to solve for, is that the technology actually isn't there, that like the experience feels human, and that they don't need to stare. You don't have to have a huge screen on reception that you kind of stare into, for example, and that you can spend more time with the guest than with a computer doing the kind of admin work in the background, etc. And obviously, like so many other things, like increasing the revenue of the hotel, as well as there's some segments where tech first experience is the right one, when you just want to an airport hotel, you just want to go in, go out.
The capsule hotel, yeah.
Yeah, you always have like a different expectation. If you go on a holiday, you have a different expectation than if you sleep in an airport hotel, and therefore the technology should be able to personalize that and cater towards that, so that in an airport hotel you can just go in basically and get in your room and get out very efficiently and very seamlessly. Whereas if you go on a holiday, you actually you don't want a digital key, you probably want a nice key basically on some
with a large wooden
with a large wooden label basically, or maybe you don't want that always, but
no, I do. What is in the accommodation? And let's say, I know it's there is a big diversity. So let's say hotel wise, not motel wise, not airport accommodation, but hotel wise. What is more important, the customer experience or the price?
That's very hard to say. Again, in different segments. So an obvious answer would be that the customer experience is the most important thing, because that means more money anyway. But there are valid segments where money is think of Ryanair. Ryanair is a great example of a business that basically says our value proposition is the price.
Yeah.
And
Bolt, Ryanair, everything.
Yeah, and we will do anything basically to make it affordable for you. And it's also fine. And then you have
does this work in economy accommodation as well?
Yeah,
being as cheap as possible.
That also obviously hostels, right? That's basically hostels.
Well, there's community and
so
common breakfast.
There are some basically that obviously offer that, but there is so many hotels and hostels out there that basically optimize for price, and it's also it doesn't have to be binary, right? A good example is IKEA. And their sort of philosophy of building furniture is okay,
you build it yourself and pay for it.
Exactly, but it's also you they have if you look at a wardrobe basically, they put on the color in front of, because that's where you see the wardrobe. But if you look at the back of the wardrobe, there is no color basically there, because you don't need color at the back of the wardrobe, and it's sort of this kind of quality and price ratio optimization for the best possible quality for within a given price range. So I think it depends, but obviously the more expensive the hotel is, the more they over index on customer and guest experience, the cheaper it is. Then obviously you have to have some drawbacks for why it is actually cheaper.
Where in one of your interviews you mentioned a study that half a star can mean 10 to 20% of revenue. So how often do you personally write reviews?
And how this was something that actually one of the founders of Atomize, which is a company we bought last year, they mentioned this review that every single half a star on Google or TripAdvisor can mean 20% more revenues. I always leave a review when it's really good or really bad, the extremes. Yeah. I never do a 4-star, it was fine. But when it was excellent, I always do kind of want to put that in and make sure that people do see it, and it's also when it's awful, I want people to avoid it. So.
Yes, same here. And my last question is about food. You foodie, what is the weirdest food you've ever eaten? The weirdest one.
Weirdest food I've ever eaten.
We've got worms and spiders, and jellyfish.
I usually try to avoid weird food. Yeah, I can't I can't remember something like super weird. Like when we travel quite a lot, and I think I've ate some things maybe in Indonesia, etc. But I don't remember what those were. Sometimes I didn't know. I guess probably the weirdest thing is something I still don't know what it was.
There's nothing bad you can eat in Indonesia. It's nasi goreng, everything.
Yeah, nasi goreng all the time. But I had a very bad belly belly after.
Everybody has to experience belly belly.
Indeed, but yeah, I prefer food. Like I tend to prefer food that looks normal.
Well, at least we know what you're gonna serve in your restaurant. It's gonna be normal food.
Yeah, I prefer normal food.
Peppa, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me as well.